Welcome to episode 6 of the Helpful Huddle podcast. I'm your host, Luke, and today we're going to be interviewing Dr. Indigo Vasquez, and we're going to be talking about the importance of CNS recovery. I'm also joined today by my previous episode's interview, Scott Dodd. Scott actually made this introduction and wanted to take part, so I thought that this would be a great opportunity to learn from both of them and see what Dr. Vasquez has to say. Now, just so that everyone knows, CNS is going to be repeated multiple times throughout this episode, and it just simply means the central nervous system. You'll learn much more about it during the episode. I hope you guys sit back, relax, and enjoy this ride. Welcome back to the Helpful Huddle podcast. I am your host, Luke, and I'm sitting here with two very special people. Our guest today is Dr. Indigo Vasquez. Say hi to the people, doctor.
Hello.
And I'm also here with my previous episode's interview, Scott Dodd. Say hi to the people, Scott.
What's up, everybody?
So we're coming to you today in a group of three because Scott was kind enough to introduce me to Dr. Vasquez, but she makes us call her Indy. So from now on, I'll be calling her Indy. So I actually don't know this guest personally, besides some emails and texts back and forth a little bit. So I'm gonna actually let Scott introduce her. And how did you guys meet each other?
Yeah, so it's funny. In the last episode, we had talked about how we met down in Houston, you and I, Luke, at that conference with Lifetime.
Yep.
So after that conference, same day was the first time that I went out to Denver. And when I visited Denver, I visited the Westminster location. And was it Ironworks? Was that the other one, Indy?
Flatiron.
Flatiron. So I visited both locations, ended up choosing to go to Westminster after talking to the PTM there. And that's where I met Indy. She was one of the nutrition coaches that I worked with. Really gave her a lot of referrals when we were doing the onboarding process.
Mm-hmm.
Really sat down and tried to pick her brain as much as possible. Like, she was one of the people that I referenced in the last episode too, quite a bit. Does a bunch of myofascial release, started getting into holistic work. And so her and I just kind of hit it off pretty quickly, became friends very fast. And then, the rest is here. So we spent the last 2 or 3 years really bouncing ideas off of each other and just making sure that we stay in touch.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. And it's so cool. And I really appreciate that you're coming on here with us to do this interview, as well as making that introduction. And Indy, I also want to thank you for coming on this podcast and sharing your knowledge with us today.
Absolutely.
So I do want to go ahead and just jump right in, and because I'm interested to get to know you, because I know nothing about you besides what kind of you focus on,
Mm-hmm.
and that's just in the last week. So I want to start off broad and kind of hear your story and your journey and kind of just about your upbringing, how you got to where you are today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I started really early as a baby nerd. I would go to Borders, if you remember Borders bookstores. My mom would take me there, and she would allow me to pick whatever anatomy and physiology textbooks, the disease textbooks, all of that. I was maybe 8, 9 years old. I started with that. So I was always very interested in the healing arts. I knew I wanted to be a doctor, but I wasn't sure in what form. I thought maybe I wanted to be a physical therapist. I thought I wanted to be a MD. I wasn't really sure. So as I progressed into my college career, I started struggling with some health concerns that required me to think outside the box in terms of the typical Western medicine disease management protocols, which are pretty much non-existent, right? As we know, it's not disease prevention. And so I dived into naturopathic medicine, and I really felt myself heal from there, and I became obsessed with it. And here we are today. So, of course, in the interim, as I'm going through my college career, I'm doing personal training and corrective exercise and that type of thing. I did that for 12 years before I actually launched my practice 4 years ago. So it's been going great. Let's help all the humans.
Absolutely. Yeah. And congratulations on starting your own practice. I know we were
Thanks.
talking about that a little bit off camera. But I guess something that I don't understand is what's the difference in the naturopathic type of medicine versus your regular MDs and things of
Mhm.
that nature?
Yeah, so MD medicine, of course, Western medicine has a place, right? So they're not really the best at disease prevention. They are great at emergency care. If you have a broken back, please, God help. But outside of that, if there's chronic disease management, they just don't have that knowledge. They don't treat the patient as a synergistic entity. They don't take the holistic approach. We need to make sure that we're thinking about trauma in the patient. We're thinking about nutritive status. We're thinking about, are you sleeping? Are you happy? Do you like your husband? All of those things make a huge impact on chronic disease management and then the healing process that goes along with that. And that's just something that MD medicine just doesn't offer,
And
unfortunately.
Luke, I think this is why I was so drawn to Indy when I had first met
Mhm.
her, was because my thought process as far as like sports performance is almost the same, right? Like if we can teach an athlete how to be stronger and healthier so that they don't have to go through physical therapy, it's very Western medicine almost feels very reactive to everything.
Yeah.
We wait for the problem and then we give you some sort of medication and here's a chemical that's going to help it versus like a holistic approach is how can I do everything to make sure that we don't get to that step. That's why I loved sitting and just picking Indy's brain as much as possible.
Yeah, and
For
I
sure.
think that, yeah, I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but I
No.
feel like I don't want a dog. I have MD friends that are amazing, but there's a time and a place. And, my herbs, I'm not going to say and have this ego that say, all herbs are going to cure and that's what we do. There is a time and a place where I say, I don't think that I can help, So there is hopefully a relationship that we're going to start growing because a lot of MDs are starting to go into that functional medicine mindset because of the way the country is moving now. We're moving into that holistic mindset.
Yeah, and I love that. And Scott, what I was going to say was that this feels like we're taking a deeper dive because we spend a little bit of time talking about preventing injury and things like that. And this is preventative health. Bless you.
Please edit that out.
So this feels like a deeper dive into it. And Indy, I totally understand. There's always a time and place for everything. I mean, if someone turns and breaks their ankle and they need ankle surgery, I don't think it's going to
Yes,
help unless
I
they go to
can't
an
help
orthopedic
it.
surgeon, right?
Yeah.
So, no, I love it. And then just my purposes and our listeners' purposes, what's the like education / degree path look like? And I don't think you went through it, but do you know how it differs from that of someone that takes the traditional way of medicine path?
Yeah. So from my understanding and talking to my friends who are medical doctors, they don't have a huge education on nutrition therapy, on stress management. They are very pharmaceutical driven in terms of their education. Of course, advanced disease management and understanding is what they have. I do too, but I also have, how do we improve the central nervous system health? How does that pertain to your digestive health? How is your sleep, your HRV, deep sleep? How is that affecting your ability to recover during the day? That type of thing. And a lot of my MD friends don't have that sort of education unless they specialize and go further. And so that's what makes us different in terms of education.
Gotcha. And I've heard that from my clients and friends that are MDs that they don't get the nutritional advice or they spend like a week of their 4 years in med school on it and things like that. And
yeah, 1 credit. That's what I was told. But that's okay. I mean, we get into medicine because we want to help people, and so I want to have love for all of those who decide to commit their life to the healing arts. But I'm not for everyone, and Western medicine isn't for everyone either. So
right, but it's about finding those opportunities, not finding, providing those opportunities to have people meet you where they are, and everyone's going to have a different flavor. Hey, everyone's favorite ice cream flavor is different, so it's about providing that flavor.
Yeah, exactly.
But you mentioned like that everyone that goes into this degree path, like MDs, NDs, DOs, all like are at the end of the day, they're trying to help people. And we were talking a little bit about why I started this podcast off camera.
Mm-hmm.
But was there a moment in your life where you knew you wanted to help people? I know you said that you want from a young age you knew you wanted to be a doctor. Was there a reason for that? I guess is what
Mm-hmm.
I'm asking.
Yeah, so I actually suffered and still struggle with a severe autoimmune disease that went undiagnosed for quite some time. As a result, I my childhood was challenging. I was very sick. Um, I didn't grow. I'm very little. God knows, very little, and I was passed around the Western medicine world. They just kind of, well, she's tired, well, she needs to lose weight. Well, she needs to exercise more, and it really disappointed me to when I was 18. I actually had a doctor who said, why is your heart rhythm, why are you at 32 beats per minute as an 18-year-old? And I'm like, I don't know, I feel like I'm gonna die, but everybody's telling me I'm fine. So she actually advocated me, and that really sparked something inside of me to say, I really want to be a voice for people who feel this way, who are saying something's wrong and they're telling me nothing's wrong. I feel like I'm crazy. That really, from then on, I would say from 18 on, I'm 37 now, I have just dedicated my life to obsessing over root cause. How can I advocate for my patient? How can I make my patient feel heard? Because I want them to say, you made me feel heard. That's my ultimate goal.
That is absolutely amazing. And I'm sorry to hear about like the medical issues that you've had to go through and kind of getting passed around, but I'm not sorry that you found someone that sparked your interest and you
Mm-hmm.
knew what you wanted to do and you're here now helping people
Right.
because of what's happened to you.
Right. And that's the thing, is there is a prerequisite. There is a prerequisite in suffering to become a good healer. We have to experience suffering so that we can have that compassion and understanding for somebody coming to me to say, I feel A, B, and C. And I can say, well, I actually understand how you feel. And I know how we can get through it. So,
Yeah.
it's okay. I don't regret anything that I've gone through. I feel like it's supposed to be.
Yeah, absolutely. That's perfect. I mean, I resonate with that so much because I had, and Lord knows I've had my struggles with injuries and
Mm-hmm.
near-death experiences and all of those things. And it does make you a lot more compassionate towards people and their stories. And it may not be an apple for an apple, if you will, but you understand the struggle, and that's a big piece of it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I'm going to flip script a little bit, or flip back script, that because I do want to dive a little bit deeper into like what you do and kind of how your mind works. And this is actually where I'm going to defer to Scott because I know that you had a lot of great questions. So I'm going to kind of just take a back seat and let you ask those questions.
Yeah, and I think part of it too, like to be able to steer the conversation a little bit. Like I was still out in Colorado when Indy had opened up her practice, and so like I got to go in and check out the space and meet Dr. Rhonda, see some of the modalities that she was working with, which is like why I'm excited for these questions, because even being in like, not the health field, but working with people in like health and fitness, like I had never heard of any of these things. And so Indy's just blowing my mind left and right with like electrode therapy and crystal
Set.
frequency. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like just different modalities. So like I guess that's kind of where I want to start with it. So like what are some of the biggest differences that you see between like your holistic medicinal approaches and what we see in today's like modern and Western
Mm-hmm.
medicine? What are some of those modalities that are a little bit different than what people are going to see when they step into a hospital?
Mm-hmm. So my greatest implementation to my chronic disease patients is bioenergetic medicine. That is one of my doctorates. I have 3 doctorates. One of them is in bioenergetics, which is the study of electromagnetic frequency through the body, bioenergetics, right? And that's what we are at the most simplest form of who we are as entities, are vibration. And unfortunately, Western medicine doesn't recognize that as a need to treat, right? So if we have a trauma, if we have an injury, if we have surgery, the vibrational field of our body is thrown off. It is. And I explain this in the simple way of, my voice is not language. My voice is vibration coming off of my vocal cords, and it's hitting into the ear. And we've trained the brain to understand these vibrations as what we call language. And my language, my voice, whatever I'm saying, is either going to raise your vibration because I'm being positive, or lower your vibration because I'm being negative. That's the same theory that I use for my patients. Are we raising your vibration with improving your stress metabolism, improving your nutrition, your hydration? Are we using the proper herbs, that type of thing, to raise your vibration? And that's the greatest difference, in my opinion, for what I offer.
Okay. And I love that. And I think it was you and Jared were the first people who got me on to Dr. Joe Dispenza.
Yeah.
and breaking the habits of being yourself. And when I started getting into like the quantum physics side of things, and like how he breaks that down, it like everything that you're saying, it seems very distilled in his thought process too. When you talk about the fact that we're all just atoms bouncing around together, like it makes so much sense. So when you talk about raising those vibrations, obviously it's through how you're treating people, the relationships that you're creating, but you also have some modalities where you can see, okay, where are we supposed to do this? So like, I think one of the most interesting was the electrode. So like the fact that the ear, right, stems to every part of the body. So can you break down, like, when would you use some of those modalities?
So what I use is bioresonance. It's a non-linear scanning technology. It works just like ultrasound technology. So it emits a light wave. It hits the quartz crystal, and a lot of people, as people know, that ultrasound technology is one gigantic quartz crystal, right? So it amplifies that light wave, and then it collects data from the ear, which 12 cranial nerves innervate into the ear. That's your brain, right? Your brain knows what's going on with your body at every cell. Hopefully every cell, every organ, every bone, every red blood cell is being communicated with by your 12 cranial nerves. So what I do is collect that data from your brain. It's a non-biased way to help me diagnose the patient. It's a diagnostic helper tool. So I'll say, okay, give me your symptoms. I'm going to look at your face. Do you have, dark circles? Are you puffy? Can I feel you aborting your breath or holding your breath? On top of health history, ABC, plus, all of these blood labs. So we're super comprehensive. And I start with the bioresonance and nonlinear scanning technology.
Gotcha. So as far as, I guess, some of the common, I don't want to say issues, because that seems like the wrong word, right? But like, what are some of
imbalances?
Imbalances. Like, what are some of the things that people are typically coming to you with, right? Like, there, you probably see a lot of the same things that people would go to Western medicine, but like, you've worked with such a broad scope of people, whether it be general population up to like now you're working with more bodybuilding athletes, get really prepped and like as healthy as possible when they're going through something that is very traumatic on their body and a 14 to 16 week cut. So I guess, what are some of the most common things that you're working with between, these scopes of people?
So I'm always going to advocate central nervous system health, because whatever's going on in your CNS or your vagus nerve is directly affecting your digestive system, your heart, and so on, right? I pair that with nutrition therapy or gut healing protocols. So most of my patients have some sort of hormone imbalance, autoimmune disease, and then of course I'm trying to help my athletes stay optimized during their prep, because it's it's an aggressor on the adrenals, the HPA axis, right, and the digestive system. So I use self-care tactics, breath work, that type of thing to help improve the stress metabolism, while also working on cooling the gut down and improving the ability to bring in nutrients.
Gotcha.
Interesting. So sorry, just jumping in, because a number of my podcasts so far have kind of been around bodybuilding. It just happens to be,
Hmm.
the people I know from being in the industry.
Mhm.
So I guess what are the benefits to a bodybuilder, whether it's prep or not, of going through these type of therapies and how you
Hmm.
can help them with that?
Yeah. So I often push more because the nutrition is typically under control, right? Because they're on prep diet. But often missed is the central nervous system health. And I explain it to my bodybuilders as we have to do our breath work, we have to do our meditation. You need to sit outside and watch the sun come up, because the safer your body feels, the more your muscles are going to be able to recover. The safer you feel, the more likely your body's going to say, okay, I feel safe in leaning out and allowing this high energy consumption muscle tissue to stay, right? So we have these bodybuilders that do pretty well, but so a lot of them burn out. It's a tough sport. It can be a dangerous sport, and without combining that recovery, they burn out. They can't grow. They're not leaning out right. Now they come out with hypothyroidism and whatever else happens. So that's how I try and to support my athletes in terms of helping them recover, because we know the recovery is greater than the output in the gym, right? That's the most important thing.
Well, when you think about it too, like going through, let's say it's 3 to 4 months, maybe 6 months of a bulking phase, and then
Mm-hmm.
you have 16 weeks of just the most stress that your body is going to
Mm-hmm.
endure throughout the course of the year. If you're constantly in that like fight or flight mode, your cortisol has to be spiked. You're not going to recover the same way. Your cut's not going
Right.
to go as well. Your body's going to feel like trash. Most people, they have like the low carb brain when they're going through it. So like
Mm-hmm.
anything that you can do to make that experience suck a little bit less, I feel like is just a benefit as a whole for
Right.
the athlete.
Right. Yeah, I like to see my athletes purposely after stage, 2 weeks after they come in 2 weeks after their stage or their show, because I want to make sure that I start the healing process as quickly as possible. Of course, I'm supporting them up until that day, but then we got to shift gears quickly and get them supported in a different way.
And I guess, Scott, I suppose I think you answered what my follow-up question was going to be, but if Indy has anything to add to it, my question was, because you kept using that word safe. Like,
Yeah.
why does, I guess, feeling safe, especially in that mindset, and like
Hmm.
Scott was talking about the fight or flight, why does that matter so
Hmm.
much to the human body and to the muscles?
Yeah. So we want parasympathetic response, right? And I say that's my word for safe, that rest and digest. Um, when we are in our parasympathetic state, we're bringing blood flow into the digestive system. We're improving peristalsis. We're breaking down foods better. We're absorbing nutrients better. Our body feels comfortable in bringing up metabolism, because when your body is in fight or flight for so long, if your cortisol is coming up, your estrogen's coming up, and that's going to downregulate thyroid hormone production and even more thyroid hormone utilization at the cellular level. So you're wanting to convince your brain that you're not running from a bear all the time, because you've got a prehistoric brain. We're not, I mean, we've been in this environment, this artificial environment for what, 200 years, if that.
Mhm.
Air conditioning, even less. So our brains are conditioned for survival, whether we like it or not. It's either we're in a danger state or we're in a safe state. And unfortunately, if you're not using that parasympathetic portion of the vagus nerve, it's going to atrophy, just like if you're not doing your bicep curls. It's going to atrophy. Your biceps aren't going to be what we'd like them to be. So we have to really exercise that ability to go into that parasympathetic response system, so that we can long-term heal from any lift or any disease or whatever it means. Whatever you're doing, we got to feel safe.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. And where my mind just went was like, this is so much more than just for bodybuilders, right? Like,
Mhm.
feel, feeling safer, the parasympathetic part of it, that's going to be beneficial for everyone, not
Oh
just
yeah.
bodybuilders on prep or bulking or whatever.
Yeah.
Like if you not just, and it's just not results in the gym oriented
Mhm.
either. Like if you want to be overall healthy, you need to, I'm going to just keep saying, feel safe.
That's right. We need to. And it's, I mean, I'm seeing it. We do not, in our culture, we do not really teach people or even our children how to regulate our nervous systems. We really, even at a very young age, I mean, I was taught, oh, 6:30, you got to get up. Let's start the day. Go, go, go. Let's, can't sit. Don't stay idle. That's laziness. And unfortunately, it's caused some problems. We when we are idle, we become more anxious because we feel like we're being lazy or we're not doing enough, or our nervous system feels, like we shouldn't be sitting here relaxing, reading a book. I mean, should be doing something that is just and so
Mhm.
it causes problems. So we're on a mission. We got to be on a mission and teach people how to feel safe, and it's okay to rest. Stillness is medicine.
How much of like, we're in a weird time in society right now. One, I think because of technology, and that's about to follow up with what you're saying about feeling anxious and sitting still. But how much of like this like hustle and grind culture do you think is really excuse me, Ronies, do you think is really affecting the everybody's like central nervous system or that ability to regulate?
Oh,
Because everywhere that you're seeing, you look on social media and it's, I'm working 16 hours a day, or like I'm an Ed Milet and I talk about how to break up a day into 4 different days so that you can be more productive, because we can't waste any time because we're
mm-hmm.
trying to grind as hard as we possibly can. And I feel like there's so many people getting stuck in that rut, excuse me, um, that it's offsetting everybody,
Oh,
because
yeah.
in that moment where you're like, okay, I'm relaxing. Well, why am I relaxing? Right? Like I should be going and doing so. I completely agree with that. But do you think it's because of like the stigma in society that if we sit still, we're lazy and unproductive? And
Mhm.
how do we kind of fix that mental shift?
Yeah, I think it's super complex, right? I feel like it's a combination of being taught to do that at a young age, and
Mhm.
then also this trauma response. Trauma response is to stay busy. Because when you become still, you start thinking about the things that hurt.
Mhm.
And when you're not still and you're busy, you have a distraction. And so we really have to think about that. I think it's a huge problem, as well as the constant the TV, the iPads, the iPhones, the dun, 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 dun. We never have a break. Turn it off. We need to go outside and we need to watch the birds play. We need to lay in the hammock. We need to watch the sun go down. I think it's a huge problem. I think people are so disconnected to the earth
Mhm.
that we've really become a unstable, in for the lack of a better word. There's a lot of there's a mental health crisis. We know that there is a mental health
For
crisis, and I
sure.
feel like, yes, and I feel like in our children especially, we know this, and I feel like this is a huge problem. I think it's getting worse
Mhm.
because we're not. I mean, when was the last time you saw a couple of kids running down the street throwing a football? I don't see that anymore. Do you in your neighborhood?
Yeah.
Not much.
No, unless they're
Yeah.
coming into the facility that I work at. I like, you don't see kids playing pickup baseball, pickup basketball at the local park, a flag football game. Like it's definitely different now than even just like I say, like since I was growing up. I don't feel like I'm that old. Like 27 is not that far away, right? But I feel like
Right.
when I look at today's youth, they're not going out and doing the same things that we were. Just putting your feet
Right.
in the grass, running around barefoot. Like
Hmm.
with
Right.
today in technology, and this is actually kind of ironic that Bo Burnham, who's a comedian who makes all of his money off of YouTube and Netflix, um, he was doing an interview where he talked about, today, like the real estate that people are selling is your attention span and your free time. So like Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, they're trying to go after as much real estate within your brain as possible. So if
Oh,
you are
yeah.
still, you pull out your phone and you look at Instagram and you see a targeted ad and so on and
Mm-hmm.
so forth. And so when you look at like kids today, and especially like some of the ones that I work with, their attention spans are so short because
Yep.
they always are being stimulated by something and something and
Mm-hmm.
something that messes with your dopamine response. And so like, what are some of those modalities or some of the things that you can do to trigger the same kind of like dopamine or serotonin rather than getting it from social media
Mm-hmm.
or interactions with other people, or constantly being stimulated by something, whether it's in society or on a screen or right in front of you.
Mm-hmm. So my favorite thing when my patient is sitting in front of me is I like to ask them, what is your art that you're not doing anymore that you used to do when you were a kid? And that usually they get like, well, a little tears start to come up.
Mm.
I'm an artist, as you know, so I like to use that as a means for healing. Because when you're making something, when you're creating, whether it's strumming on the guitar, crocheting, putting something with paint on paper, you are not only are you calming your central nervous system down, but you're receiving that dopamine response that I am making something and here is the reward.
Mm.
Whether that, it doesn't matter whether that is, I want you to learn something new, challenge yourself. Why don't you read a book? When was the last time that you read a book? Do you like non-fictional books? Do you like, fictional books? Great. When was the last time you allowed yourself to pick a book that had a really neat cover on it and the art was really cool and you liked it and you were attracted to it? When was the last time you allowed yourself to do that? And then I challenge them because it's uncomfortable when you tell somebody, stop with the phone, turn the TV off. You don't need to check your emails. Take your iWatch off. You don't need to be, ding, ding, ding. I got my messages. I get my emails and then Instagram, all of that. It's constant stimulation.
Yeah.
And it's uncomfortable. When you come away from that initially, your cells are like, whoa, wait a second. I feel a little comfortable. So you have to sit in that discomfort for a little while.
Mm. No, I like that. And I think growth is at the beginning of discomfort, right?
Oh, yeah.
You start to get comfortable being uncomfortable. That's where the biggest growth happens. So I think that's awesome. Yeah, I guess what kind of questions do you have to piggyback off of that, Luke? I'm trying to wrap. I've got a couple more that I'm thinking in my head, but I want to get some of your input too.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about your mind being blown. So far, my mind's being blown. So my head's a little bit of everywhere. But I guess not a random question, but one that popped in my mind was like, what's the benefit of getting away from the screens? Because a lot of people, and a lot of people that I know personally, like their relaxation time or what have you is like watching a movie or whatever it might be. But there's got to be a benefit of turning that stimulus off. And like you keep talking about watching the sunrise or sunset or things like that. Why is that differentiation so important of getting away from the technology stimulus of it?
Well, that's multifactorial because for me, I want to detox my patient a little bit from electromagnetic fields, right? I can see I'm so sensitive that I could feel the vibrations coming off the TV. It does not feel very good for me, especially if the television is turned up. You can feel it. There's a lot of radiation coming off the laptops, the phones, right? So for me, I would like to, of course, detox from EMF, but I also want to encourage the patient or the client to be allowed to explore themselves intimately. And I mean that by, what do you like to do? Who are you? Who have you forgotten? Who you have children, you've got a spouse, you've got all these things. Do you even know who you are anymore? And these distractions, as this, I'm resting and this is how I distract, is okay. I love a good movie, but turn it down. Get on the floor and start stretching, doing some breath work. You can still watch your movie, right? But coming away from this constant distraction that's designed to keep you in a certain mental state, right? So we want to encourage the patient to do that. I like the sunset and the sunrise is important for me because I'm always wanting to improve the circadian rhythm. And we know that the easiest way to do that is to look outside and watch that sunrise. It's amazing. It feels really good. And when you actually do it, if you actually connect, stop what you're doing, be present and look at the sunrise, you're like, whoa, it does something to your brain. Your eyes do something funny and you get these like tingles, right? And so throughout the course of the day, you're going to have a better mood, hopefully, unless somebody distracts you from that better mood, right? And then it will progress into a good a night's sleep, ideally with sustained exercise.
Do you think part of that too is like like when I'm watching TV or I'm seeing something on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, whatever, like that's artificial energy coming my way versus like watching the sunset, and like that's true, like raw, like actual energy.
Yeah, I mean, we know the science behind the importance of grounding. You cannot deny how important it is to ground and connect with the earth. It does something to your electromagnetic field. That's something that you don't get from using these artificial devices. It continues to aggravate your central nervous system.
Yeah. And I like that, like you always bring up energy, which is, I think, the thing that I appreciate the most. Like so Indy is very sensitive to energy. Like she had mentioned earlier, like there would be days where I would come into Lifetime and she was working on like my quads or whatever was wrong with me that day. And before we even get into conversation, like my face might not change, my body language might be what it normally is. Like I'm usually a happy-go-lucky guy, even if there's stuff going on like at home or in the back of my mind. And then she would just start working on my quads, and about 6 seconds in a conversation, all right, what's going on with you? I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm having a great day. She goes, no, what's going on with you? There's something happening right now. She's just scraping away, and I'm crying because my quads hurt. And I'm almost like, all right, let's go through our little therapy session here.
Yeah.
And it's one of those like when you give her a hug, right? And especially on like a bad day, like you can feel the energy coming off her of her trying to like make you have a better day. And it's like, it's very little things. And once she started talking about being susceptible to other people's energy, was when I started to notice like who are the relationships that I need to pour in and who are the people who are putting more energy back into my cup versus the other way around. And also like starting to understand, the relationships that I probably don't need, because they're the people who are like energy vampires and they're just taking and taking and taking away from my good moods because I'm trying to constantly uplift them. And not to say that you shouldn't do that for your friends, but who are the people who are giving back versus constantly taking and taking? And once I started to notice that, like you can feel almost like an aura around certain people, and almost to the point now where like in a first contact with somebody, like I know that we're going to mesh very well, or we are probably not going to at all. So like, I like some people use the phrase like crunchy or granola, and especially as we are like in this very holistic medicine versus Western medicine. Do you want to dive into energy just a little bit more? I know that we've kind of glanced on it a little bit, but I think that is such a very cool concept. So wherever you want to take it from there, like let's talk just that energy a little bit more, and especially like the electromagnetic field too, because I think that is the most interesting concept to me. And if anybody hasn't read or listened to any of Joe Dispenza's stuff, I highly recommend it.
Well, so we have to talk about this all day. So Dr. Oshman or Oshner, excuse me, I read a lot of books. Oshner has a scientific basis of electromagnetic energy book out, and I encourage people to use this or as a learning tool, because it's really hard for not all people, but a lot of people to think like, well, this is woo-woo, right? And it's not woo-woo. If my patient walks in, I can say, where's the heaviness in the chest? Why do you feel like you're unworthy? And what's making you feel like you're not good enough? And the reason why that's important to medicine is that it helps somebody feel safe, which allows healing, right? And we are all gifted with this ability to read energy. Because if we go back to the initial statement of my voice is not language, it is vibration. It's the same thing. You do emit an electromagnetic field. We have studies on this. And based off of, let's go for a healthy person versus a sick person. Somebody who has an illness is going to have a lower electromagnetic field. It's going to be closer to their body. We can actually see it, right? And that plays a huge role in, am I going to mesh with them or not? It's part of energy language, and it takes practice to learn, but there are lots and lots of people that are skilled in it already. And I know, Scott, you are sensitive too, right? So, and a lot more people are becoming aware of this. So we have to take that into consideration all the time. What am I doing to protect my energy field from hazards, environmental hazards, from food hazards, from the music I listen to makes a huge impact on how my central nervous system health is. I love jamming out to like Korn and Lamb of God and all those things when I'm lifting. But outside of that, I'm like, no, I can't be adding that to my energy field because it's aggressive, it's irritating. So does that answer your question? Did I go off on it?
Yeah, a little bit. I like that you made the mention of music too, because like we have very similar taste in music, right? Like I'm a big heavy metal guy, pop punk guy, which is like not always the happiest of music. So, but like for some reason for me, and I don't know if this makes sense, I feel like my brain is constantly moving 1,000 miles an hour. So when I put on something that's louder or faster, for me, it weirdly calms me down. Like if I've had a long day, I could throw on some Asking Alexandria and just listen to that British dude just yell for the next 20 minutes while I drive home. And it like slows my heart down. And I have no idea why that happens. But it like, to me, like it's an enjoyable experience because I love going to those concerts and it gives me good memories and like things like that, right? Like where we're going to have a completely different response. So you listen to it when you work out. I listen to it when I work out and sometimes when I drive.
Yeah. No, I'm like, that would stress me out. I would be like having heart palpitations.
Yeah. And that's normally the response that I get. Everybody's like, this makes me anxious. I'm like, this calms my nerves. Maybe I'm weird.
That's okay. That's what your energy field wants.
Yeah, that makes sense. No, I always think the concept of like the energy transfer is just so interesting. I guess, what are some of the resources or who are some of the people that you think have like molded you to become the person that you are today? And I think this was a really cool question when Luke had asked me, because like, yes, I've done a bunch of research on guys like Eric Cressy and Louis Simmons, my West Side boy, like those are guys who have heavily influenced me. But I think one of the biggest things of who I am today and how I practice, how I teach, has been a lot of being molded by people that I surround myself with. And so when Luke and I were talking, like you are somebody who's very heavily influenced me. My friend Kelly out in Colorado also has very like heavily influenced me and how I, think and train and teach and people just to be able to bounce ideas and concepts. And like, everybody talks about you are the 5 people that you surround yourself with. And are they going to make you a better person? Are you going to be the 6th millionaire? Stuff like that. So who are some of the people who have influenced you in how you practice today? And I guess get some resources that we might be able to learn from that you've also learned from.
Yeah. So one of my greatest teachers, Dr. Edward Sullivan, he is a 50-year chiropractic doctor. He also is a psychotherapist and a counselor, and he dives very deep into energy medicine as healing, as a healing modality. And he was my professor for a very long time. And I took a lot of really, really great information from him from the scientific aspect, as well as Dispenza, Oshner, all of those guys, the guys, the MDs who wrote The Body Electric. I don't have that book on me. It's in my office, so I can't tell you who that is. But The Body Electric is also another scientifically backed, essentially textbook on energy and how it affects the human body or any body, right? Animals included. And so those were my mentors, but also my healing tribe. So the girls that I surround myself with are like me. They are very sensitive. They are healers. They are light workers. They dedicate and sacrifice their bodies for the sake of healing others. And that's who I consider my family, my tribe. Janae and Jamie and a bunch of other people. They'll probably listen to this podcast. I better shout y'all out. Y'all know who you are. But my girls, right? My healers. And so we always have to be very cautious. My circle is very small for that reason. And it really helps me feel better in general because I'm not putting my feelers out and having 1,000 people as my friends and 99% of them are taking. So be cautious about that too. Are the people that you're surrounding with, are they fueling you to heal? Are they wanting you to become better? If they do, great, keep all of them.
I love that.
I love that. And I'm reminded of my very first interview for this podcast was with a bodybuilding coach named Sean Irwin. But he said a quote that really stuck with me, and it's mostly about like making sure that you're keeping people around you. But it's that you can't pour from an empty cup.
Mm-hmm.
So and I'm sure that's an old phrase, but I had never heard that before.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
it's resonating with me about how many people, and both of you guys have said it, that about who you surround yourself with. And Scott, I had
right.
never heard the you are the five people that you surround yourself with.
Mhm.
Um, so all of this is blowing my mind each and every time I interview people, and I really do appreciate both of you doing this. And all that to say is, I'm going to hand it back over to Scott. Let him keep hounding you with questions.
Yeah.
You know, I that's that phrase is one of my favorites, and I can't remember who I heard it from first, but it made the most sense. And so it's like if you're hanging out with, you know, five people who are constantly, you know, hammered every weekend or smoking weed all the time and unproductive and lazy, like you're probably going to fall into some of those habits, right? If
Mhm.
you're hanging out with five millionaires, good chances they're going to teach you what they've done to get there, and you're going to become the sixth one. So it's like who do you want? Kind of like
Yep.
Indy said, who do you want in your circle that's going to make you a better person? And
Who
if
wants to see you succeed?
exactly, and I absolutely love that.
Mm-hmm.
um, Probably on the similar topic, but as you get into like, you know, the holistic approaches and obviously this isn't a practice for everybody, but you think of guys like Joe Rogan, right? You talk about like utilizing different materials or substances, I guess, to open up the brain and have like a deeper dive into yourself. Like at what point, or I guess, what are some of your thoughts on things like THC, psilocybin, ayahuasca, like some of those spaces? Like, have you seen positive effects with people on some of those things? Have you seen negative effects with people on some of those things? And I
Yeah.
have to imagine that there's a broad scope for this answer too, because
Oh yeah.
everybody's experience with some of these things is completely different.
Oh yeah.
And for people who may or may not be looking to experience some of those things, how would you even recommend going about doing something like that? Because I think so many people listen to Joe Rogan, they're like, oh, that sounds like it could be a good time, and ends up being absolutely terrible. Like,
Yeah.
what are some of your takes and your thoughts on certain, I guess, natural substances that could potentially open up the brain waves just a little bit?
Yeah. So I am an advocate, of course. So I really push mushroom medicine a lot. I study earth medicine, right? I do indigenous medicine practices. So I advocate a lot of psilocybin because the studies on it are great. And then the ancient understanding of that is great as well. So just to take an example, my father, who is a 25-year military veteran who has seen war, who has triggers, PTSD, struggled. I microdose him. I've been microdosing him for 3 months now. Cap and a stem every third day in some hot water. It's not meant to get you blitzed. You're not going on a journey and becoming a new, human or anything like that. But man, it made me cry because he called me one day and he sounded different. And this man, he's a great man, but there was a little bit of anger and some stuff that we experienced as children, and he sounded lighter. He said, I feel like I'm supposed to be here. I just feel good. And I'm like, oh, so, mushroom, fantastic. I have a little bit of different relationship with cannabis, a couple of reasons, because we know that chronic long-term cannabis use can lower testosterone levels.
Mhm.
We know that if you're genetically predisposed to certain mental illnesses like bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, if you start that earlier in life, you have a greater chance of developing that sort of disorder. So I'm cautious about THC. I know the benefits. I'll have some patients use it if they are in active chemotherapy and they're having a lot of pain and they're very nauseous. I have some patients use it. They're about to go to sleep and they really have a lot of anxiety around sleep. But outside of that, I don't really advocate it a lot because for me, especially if you're smoking flower, it's very moldy. There's some other things that I don't like about flower. So when you talk about ayahuasca, great, have a grounder, have a teacher who understands the process, and as well as if you're going to be doing like DMT or something like that, you need to understand why you're doing it. Are you in the headspace? Because if you're going into a journey, like if you're going heroic dose with mushroom, I'm going to want you to be hydrated. I want you to be nutritionally sound and detoxed a little bit. And then I want to make sure that you're not in the headspace of I'm afraid of what I'm going to experience when I do this trip, because you may well accidentally put you into a terrible journey. You got to ride that wave for another 8-9 hours. So we got to make sure that you're in a good headspace if you're going on a what I call a journey. So make sure that you have somebody who understands that. They're called grounders.
Yep. That makes sense. And I guess the reason I wanted to throw that question out there, because you're starting to see people do this more and more. Like Aaron Rodgers has publicly said that he did some ayahuasca this offseason to kind of find himself again. And he's doing like some
darkness retreat.
Darkness retreat, like an immersion therapy where he's not going to see light for 4 days, and it's supposed to trigger DMT response. So he's not actually taking it, but he's triggering that response in his brain. And I think as people are starting to understand what Western medicine is doing to the body, and again, not to shit on doctors or say that Western medicine is a terrible practice. I personally think that the pre-active approach is much better than the reactive approach.
Oh, yeah.
So, how can we make sure these things don't happen? And more people are looking to trying some of these natural experiences. And so that's why I guess I wanted some more input on that. Not to say like, hey, everybody, let's go try some mushrooms this weekend and see what happens. But like, there's definitely a time and a place for things like that. And I think it's becoming interesting the more that it's becoming vocalized in public and people are speaking about their experiences to see like, is there a place where that could potentially benefit somebody? So I loved that response.
Yeah, it's old medicine. It's like they crushed it in the 60s because they were finding that, oh man, this is so beneficial. People are less controllable. Let's make this scary for everybody, right? So they really pushed mushroom and LSD and that type of thing into the ground because they were, they have their agendas or whatever. I don't want to get into that, but it's old medicine. We've been practicing ayahuasca and we've been practicing, mushroom therapy for tens of thousands of years very safely with a healer. So please, guys, whoever's watching this, don't go buy a quarter of a mushroom and go slam it and then, be vomiting for the next 8 hours. Please reach out to somebody to guide you through this.
Good. I think that's probably the best precursor to throw on that. I think honestly, that's most of the questions that I have for you, Indy. One that I really want to cover though is like, what are some of the coolest results that you have seen in your practice so far? You've been working for 12 years while finishing school doing this. You've finally had your practice running for the last 4 years now, which is incredible. And I think the work that you're doing is different from most people that you're going to run into, which is awesome. So I want to know, like, what are some of the coolest things that you've seen in your practice so far?
Yeah, so that's hard too because there's so many, right? A lot of the things I like to hear. Some of the coolest things that I've heard is I don't need my prescription medication anymore. That's the greatest. That's awesome. The greatest. In terms of I've had patients on 3 blood pressure medications. I've had patients on 2 depression medications and an anxiety med, and I get the text of like, I don't know what happened and I don't know what we've been doing, but I don't need this anymore. And, that's mind blowing to me that restoring central nervous system health, being strategic about herbal therapy, and then helping the patient understand and heal the relationship with food. Those are simple things. They're not hard to do. It's hard to be consistent with and believe in it. It takes time, but damn, I've had a patient come in and she had a squamous cell skin cancer all over her body. And I told her, what we're going to do is use the big C word. I can't use the C word. We're going to eradicate the disease, right? And in 6 weeks, of therapy, vitamin C therapy with niacinamide, oral niacinamide. She goes back to her doctor who's been treating her cancer, and he says, I don't know what you've been doing, but I no longer see this cancer on your skin. So
Wow.
how can you pick which one is the best?
Yeah.
Because I constantly, every day, I'm getting these texts and these emails of like, oh my gosh, I feel like my life is back. I'm not doing this, they're doing it, they're believing in themselves enough, they're just allowing me to recommend. But that's just, I love what I do.
You're just the guide, right? You're the healer.
Yes.
And I think that's the coolest part, right? When you talk about like what is health, it's the healing process. And so it's just like to put a bow on top of everything and what we've been talking about, it's taking the approaches to actually work on yourself, not just the cause. Because I think what we see today is we treat the problem, we don't treat the root of the problem.
Right.
So it's like essentially chopping down a tree but not getting rid of the stump.
Right.
So you still have to deal with the stump at the end of the day.
Right.
And I love that so much.
Yeah, I mean, I've had to get nitty gritty with people. They sat in my chair, going back to that reading energy, and they're telling me superficial things, and and I know that they're not getting to the root, and then I have to bust it out, and I have to say, you're still mad at your father, and that's the problem. You have a resentment, right? And of course, they're like, "What? How do you know that?" Because your energy is it's screaming it, right? It's screaming resentment. And that's the root as to why you are anxious, you can't sleep, you've got hormone imbalances, your gut's are wrecked, sometimes, most of the time, it's an emotional stagnation in the energy field. So I don't know, I love doing it. I look forward to it, doing it one day.
That's awesome.
All of this has been crazy to me, I've said it before and we talked about, like, mind blowing. Like, this is all brand new to me, so it's all blowing my mind. And what you were just talking about in your like last story of like the squamous cell skin cancers, and which that personally I didn't have it, but I worked in a dermatology clinic for a year and a half or so and saw that all the time, so that hit home because I've seen it. And not the C word, but or the eradicating of it. But that's just crazy to me. And Scott, we might have touched this in your questions because I know you had it listed down, but like the easy answer to this question is like everybody, because everybody can use you. But like your practice, who would you say, like, I don't know if needs it the most is the right question, but who would you say is like who you not typically, but should be working with?
Yeah. So my whomever feels like they are not being heard and they know something's wrong, I want to advocate that don't stop looking. Don't take that for an answer that your blood labs are normal, everything looks fine. I don't know what to tell you. Here's, Wellbutrin. So I am suitable for somebody who knows that it's going to take time and effort and sacrifice, because you can't heal in the environment that has made you sick. You got to make some changes, and you got to come to terms with yourself. And if somebody's been telling you, or multiple doctors has been saying, I don't see that there's a problem, you come see me because I'll find the problem.
And so I follow-up question for that, right? Like with what I do as far as training, right? Like I can go virtual, I can do remote sessions, I can even just do programming for people. So if somebody's not in the state of Colorado, do you have the capability of working with them? I feel like you told me some of the technology that you're able to use has been able to like broadcast even states away, miles away. Is anybody limited to being able to work with you if they're not local?
Yeah, I have patients all over the country.
Okay.
I have some patients in Thailand and Ireland as well. So Canada, that type of thing. They'll mail me in a DNA sample, but I could still use the scanning technology. I'll run a DNA sample and still get fantastic data. And I work at an MD clinic, Live Well MD. So I have that capability of sending out for blood labs and additional screenings in Canada, Mexico, that type of thing, everywhere. No matter where you are, give me a call.
I love it.
That's perfect. And I kind of want to also put a bow on this conversation because this has been amazing. But we have talked about like a lot and in depth a lot, and especially for someone like me who had never heard this stuff before, it's a lot of information and can be overwhelming. So if I were to ask you to kind of summarize like the most important things to take away from our conversation today, what is it that what would you say it was?
So the key things is always, it's okay to be still. It's okay to put yourself first, because that's going to make you a better provider in general. Always stay hydrated, because hydration is a precursor to the foundation of all health, including hormones. And then your nutrition therapy. How are you feeding yourself? Okay, so rest and recovery, hydration, nutrition. If you can nail those foundations, you're going to feel better. There's no way. And then on top of that, if you're working with a practitioner, you'll have herbal therapies and other modalities, right? But you can do those things on your own. You have to decide to be done with being uncomfortable, right? You become comfortable with being uncomfortable, but you have to be done with that shit. You got to be sick of your own shit, is what I like to say, right? And you're like, I'm tired of feeling this way. I'm doing something about it. And it comes down to those three things.
I think I saw a meme the other day, and it was somebody talking to their physician. You go, do you feel any kind of pain? Oh, just the normal amount. Well, the normal amount is 0.
Yeah.
So it was like that resonated quite a bit.
Right.
That's where everybody's like, I wake up with head fog, or I'm sleepy all the time, or like, that's not how you're supposed to feel.
Right.
So I love that comment.
Yeah, I'm that normal kind of tired. Normal kind of tired.
Zero.
What kind of tired are you? Hold on a second.
That made me think of that Jim Carrey meme where he's like holding his coffee cup and he's like, and it says, "Oh man, you look stressed." He's like, "Thanks, it's the stress."
It's true. We have a weird relationship with stress, don't we?
Yeah,
we do. It's become so normalized.
Yeah, no. It's a syndrome. That's a generalized adaptation problem. We don't want that.
And this is kind of crazy. We've talked about hormone therapy, energy, all the time. We really haven't even tapped in on gut health that much, and we're an hour into this conversation.
Yeah,
I feel like that almost could be saved for another like follow-up conversation.
Sure.
To really dive deep into that, because I feel like that's something that we could probably talk about for another hour and a half too.
I'd love to.
We're definitely going to have to. We're going to have to rename this episode of just CNS recovery and do a whole gut health episode. So I'm going to get you both on the books for that.
Okay.
And with respect to everyone's time, I do want to wrap this up by saying thank you to both of you for doing this, taking the time, especially you, Dr. Vasquez. I'm going to use use that name for taking this time. And I do want to give you the opportunity, Scott. You had your opportunity last week. Your episode's already out, but Indy, Dr. Vasquez, if people wanted to get in touch with you, how would they do that? If they want to work with you, how would they get in touch to make an appointment? And if they just simply want to follow your journey somehow, how do they do those things?
The easiest way is to just follow me on Instagram. A lot of people reach out to me for appointments on Instagram. I have lots of really neat learning stuffs on Instagram. I put some positive things, and I put some funny things, and I put my art. So follow me on Instagram, and then give me a DM. Slide into my DMs.
What's your Instagram handle, Indy?
It is dr.indigo Vasquez.
Okay.
Perfect. And for people watching on YouTube, that is going to be below Indy. And if you're just listening on Spotify or Apple Podcast, it is going to be in that description. And you mentioned your practice that you work out of earlier. What was it called again? Living Well?
Live Well, MD.
Got it.
Not to be confused with Live Well, the cannabis company. Okay, I get that a lot. MD, Live Well, MD.
Live well indeed. We got it. We got it. We'll remember. But I'll
Awesome.
also put that hyperlink and underneath you as well as in the description. Um, Guys, do you have any final thoughts you want to leave our listeners with?
I think we covered all of the
Yes.
things going through my brain. No, that was
Yes.
awesome. I'm glad that I got to be a part of this too, Luke. Obviously, like introducing you guys and getting her name out there a little bit more, but just watching like her grow over the last 4 or 5 years since I've known her has been so exciting, and just to see the work that she's doing has been so much fun, and even to get the chance to pick her brain just a little bit more today has been quite the treat. So
Oh, you guys are sweet. Thank you. I'm happy to come on whenever. I love doing this type of thing.
She geeks out with the rest of us.
I do.
I love that. And we are going to have to do a gut health episode. I'm writing it down right now. So we will get you back on the books to do that.
Sure.
But I do want to close us out and say thank you to all of our listeners. Thank you to both of you guys for doing this interview. And we will see you guys next time. Say bye to the people, everyone.
Bye. Thanks for
Thank you.
listening.
Thank you for listening to episode 6 of the Helpful Huddle podcast, where I had help from Scott Dodd to interview Dr. Indigo Vasquez about the importance of CNS recovery. Remember to give us a like and a follow on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter with the user handle at helpful_huddle and the YouTube channel at Helpful Huddle Podcast. You are also able to listen to us both on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. The links are also found in the description below. Please reach out with your questions on topics that you would like to learn about in the future.